Hello, everyone. This is Richard Greenberg here to talk about breaches are everywhere. What's a good security leader to do? A little bit about me. I'm the founder of Security Advisors, LLC. I've also been honored with a couple of recognitions from the Information Systems Security Association, an international organization of InfoSec professionals. I'm on their honor roll and a distinguished fellow with them. I've served as a CISO for 15 years, gathering a lot of experience, which I will be sharing with you today. I was elected to the OWASP Global Board of Directors. OWASP is an organization of professionals dealing with software security. I also run the local Los Angeles chapters of ISSA and OWASP. So today, we all know about COVID-19. It's changed the landscape of everything that we're doing. Boardrooms now have security on their agendas 80% of the time. Breaches are a weekly news item on mainstream media, and friends and relatives call us for advice or to ask what we think of the latest attack. I'm sure we've all experienced this, and governments are even looking to create security and privacy regulations. But don't expect regulations to save us, nor to form your security plan. Lawmakers are notoriously behind the technology timeline, and they're typically legislating against yesterday's attacks. However, the visibility we get from laws can help us get the attention of upper management and legal counsel, so there's good value there. So let's continue. Our data is leaking, right? Breaches are occurring everywhere, seemingly in every company. Phishing attacks are multiplying and are now the preferred method of infiltration. And unfortunately, the average time to identify and contain a breach is 279 days. And unfortunately, it's too often externally found and notified of the breach. So our monitoring has to increase tremendously. How about the life cycle of a malicious attack? From the breach to containment, it takes 314 days. And today's attackers are silent. They just want to get in, exfiltrate your data, and get out. And they try to destroy their footprints. So a lot of companies, and that number is unknown, however, I suspect it's quite high. A lot of companies don't even know that they've been breached and their data has been exfiltrated. No more script kiddies just trying to hack for fun. So this means the times are changing. How about you? Are you changing? Every business now is a target. Every medical device is a target. Every car, every refrigerator, even the smart TVs in boardrooms can be a penetration point into a network, and there are documented cases of this. Drones are now being used and can eavesdrop and can be used to get access to data. Do you have a business transformation strategy? I mentioned COVID in the beginning. I'm sure you had to jump into something, but do you have a plan, right? And how about IoT? They're insecure by nature. Any company that's making IoT devices today is not taking security seriously enough, right? So don't deploy them on your network without a good vulnerability assessment and a good security control in place to manage them. Let's talk about data breach costs. The average globally of a data breach is now up to $3.9 million. Yes, that's the average per breach. And the extensive use of IoT has increased that cost by $5 per record. So let's say you have a mega breach of 1 million records, which is quite easy now with the amount of data people hold. You're going to look at a cost of $40 million for that breach. A mega breach of 50 million, and there are unfortunately more and more of those on the radar, there's an average total cost of 350 million for that one. Third-party partner breaches can cost an extra 370,000 on average. So are you doing good third-party risk assessments? So breaches are increasing, as is the sophistication of the attacks. And all organizations are now targets. I remember a conversation that I had with a CIO many years ago, and it was as follows. Hey, we're not a financial institution. We're not a target. Well, guess what? we all are today, because data is now worth more than credit cards, and people's personal information, and particularly medical records, are worth 10 times what cards are worth today. So what's a good security leader to do? Well, take your show on the road, go on tour, speak at division meetings, speak at general staff meetings, and make sure you have security awareness training for everyone. Do not omit the executive team, because they always want to be excluded, right? They are very busy. They don't want to follow basic rules, and it's going to be a challenge, if it isn't already for you, to make sure that they follow the good security plan that you put in place, particularly the training. Make sure you address your company's vulnerability trends, because every company is different. Don't just look at a template that somebody gives you. Use that as a skeleton and build on it and add your company's culture. How about gamifying your training, right? What I mean by that is, don't just do what I'm doing here with a presentation, right? You guys are all security professionals, but your average person will zone out if you just give PowerPoints. Consider providing incentives and prizes. Pit division against division, group business unit against business unit, award a prize, right? Do phishing simulations. And again, don't forget the executives, because they will fall for it more than the average person. And, you know, how about gift cards or a prime parking spot in the company parking lot with a big sign, security champion, or something along those lines. And train your own team. Remember that, very important. So let's talk about patch management. We've all heard how difficult that can be when you have a large network and a diverse network. But make sure you have processes in place to ensure regular, timely, and enterprise-wide patching, right? Test it first, because you can't trust a patch coming from a vendor all the time. Some of those have been known to damage systems. You've got to be able to roll those back, and a test group is essential if you're going to do that. Make sure you have systems that are representative of all the different types of systems you have in your organization. Make sure you include third-party apps in your patching program. And try to minimize excluding systems from your patching. You will get requests from system owners. Oh no, don't do this because the vendor told us not to patch our systems. Okay, you have to work with them on that, but you want to minimize the amount of systems that are excluded. Okay, of course, it's got to be transparent. Users log in, they should not know anything about patching unless you have a major patch that requires a reboot. And any systems that can't be patched, right? We talked about excluding some, but if there are some, you've got to isolate them, all right? Use VLANs and firewall rules. An example might be a medical system that the vendor says is not certified. If you patch it, and then you'll have to have firewall rules, which, for example, will prevent anyone but systems that need this access from accessing that. That box can't dial out. Applications other than this particular one cannot run on that system. You might have to contact the vendor of these systems directly to discuss how this will work, how you'll do patches. Perhaps you work out a plan with them where they help run the patches. Companies now are much more responsive to demands from InfoSec to get their systems patched. The old days of, no, you can't touch this, are pretty much gone. So there are ways to be successful with this. Also, meet with key players, right? Identify the key stakeholders and decision makers. These are not always just executive board. There are key players who culturally have had an incredibly high value and a large voice in a company. Befriend those, right? How about lunch with key executives? Too often security is buried in the org chart, and so you need to go outside the formal structure and reach out to these leaders. And who are these people? Well, they're also CTOs or the heads of system admins, division heads, And of course, legal and risk compliance, because those will be your champions. Because what is the essential job that an information security leader does? It's risk. So you've got to talk to them, and then you've also got to learn businessese, which is the language that the executives speak. They don't care about the number of breach attempts. They don't care. We'll talk more about that later. You've got to have good configuration management, all right? Ensure that a standard image is created, and make sure you update it and test it on a regular basis, because you will have to update that, and you'll need to update that image as well and test it. And please deploy it even on your system admin systems. Quite often they forget about that, and they're saying, oh, we're separate, we know what we're doing, but everybody is a potential entry point into your network. So please harden all systems, lock them all down, and remove unneeded services. Very important. And you must have a change management process. You can't just make changes. You need to be able to back out. You also need to make sure that you have a good change management board that meets regularly. Make sure this board has key players from application security, if you have that division, from your own security team. Field support and system administration also need to be there, and of course, network management. And let's talk about policies, because I believe that there are issues here that might not be as obvious to some of you, but policies are crucial, right? Every company has to have a top-level information security policy. But here's the difference. Don't include procedures in policies. Policy should be we shall, and the procedures are how you achieve those. So the big issue is this. Policies are hard to make their way through all the approval processes and finally get published, right? But procedures are constantly changing based on technology, based on culture. You know, new information is coming out pretty much weekly on breaches and vulnerabilities, and you might have to come up with new strategies and even new technology on a regular basis. So you don't want to change your policy over and over. Upper management will get really tired of signing off on this. HR often has to get involved. So keep your procedures separate. You can change those procedures, turn on a dime basically, but the policies need to stay there for a while. But if there are significant infrastructure changes, that's when you need to review the policies to see if a change might be made. And don't forget, this is not just on security leaders. Human resources needs to get involved and help get all staff to sign an acceptable use policy every year. A good time to do that quite often is when the reviews occur for people's performance evaluations. Have them sign as well. Don't forget about BYOD. Make sure you've got a plan and processes for that. This is too important. Many users want to carry only one device and will find a way to get their data. Right? So make sure you have a good strategy to address this. For example, having a good MDM solution. Let's talk about an often forgotten aspect of security, which is, in my opinion, the most neglected and the most important, right? And that is secure development lifecycle. If you are doing any development at all in your company, there's a good chance it can be dramatically improved, okay? So step one, make sure you have a good relationship with the head of application development. They will be your best friend because they have the ear of upper management, because they are key for the revenue generating area when it comes to applications, okay? Any project that's coming down the pipe must be reviewed by InfoSec, okay? And you've got to be involved from the very beginning of any project. Too important. When applications are being developed, there's a couple of different ways that automation can be built in, and one of them is using a static vulnerability scanner. That lives in the development aspect of the process. The developers will check in their code regularly, and this static analyzer will look at it and see if there are potential vulnerabilities, and even provide good blueprints for how to fix it. There'll be links to websites where, here, use this code instead of this code, or watch out, don't use hardened passwords, for example, in your code. And dynamic scanning scans the compiled code afterwards. That's typically done by the information security team. And that is one of the last gates that an application must pass through before it can go live. However, there are several open source solutions available because these scanners can run up quite a cost. So take a look at those. ZAP is a open source solution developed by OWASP. That's one example. You can also look into runtime application self-protection, which runs all the time as opposed to specific point in time scanning. So it depends on your culture too. But ultimately, you want to automate as much as you can, particularly with DevOps and DevSecOps becoming such a commonplace process today. They will need you to automate, or they will leave you in the dust, and then security will not even be bothered with. But also, you must hire a penetration tester because all the automated and technological solutions will not catch a fair amount of vulnerabilities. There are documented cases where people said, hey, we ran our vulnerability scanner, but you need to have somebody actually go in manually and test your code. If the costs are insurmountable to you, then at least identify your critical apps and hire a pen tester for all of those. Or if you want to have your own internal pen testing team, that is fine too. It's just always hard to keep those people trained up to date on the latest vulnerabilities and solutions, and retain them as well because they are in great demand. Work with the head of application development and make sure that all the developers take secure code training. My experience with developers, they want to have their code secure, but the training that they received in college or universities is not up to par when it comes to security. They learn great secrets and techniques and libraries to use. However, they don't learn about the security enough. It's just not there yet. It's improving, but the curriculum of schools needs to be improved. So it's up to us to identify trainers and classes and get your application development team trained to think more about security. They want it. That's, look at it this way. Their creations, their code is their baby, and they want it to look beautiful and be healthy. But it's up to us to help lead that. Don't forget, OWASP, I mentioned it before, it's a not-for-profit organization. There are people internationally that just devote their time to building free research tools and templates and frameworks. An example is the Application Security Verification Standard, ASVS. That's a project that provides a basis for testing web application technical security controls, but it also provides developers with a list of requirements for secure development. So it's a great framework that developers can use. Many of them are not familiar with it. I strongly advise you take a look. Now let's not forget about your physical environment. We oftentimes overlook the importance of this because we're data central and data centric. However, does your facilities head purchase physical security solutions without your involvement or even knowledge, right? Physical security access cards, those cards that many companies issue to staff to allow them into secure areas or even into your building. Too often, they're still easy to hack. Somebody can get a proximity reader easily enough online, walk by somebody with the card and scrape their data and their credentials from that card, go back, make their own card, and now they've got access. And this has been documented over and over. Some organizations have what are called CISOs, Chief Security Officers, and under them quite often is the physical security. But the majority of companies have information security and physical security managed by different people. So it's crucial that you coordinate and work with them, right? For example, do you even know who has access to your data center, or is that managed by your physical security person? Do they manage the locks, the entry keys, the access cards into your data center? You need to be involved with that. And can you look at a log and see who has had access, right? How about when people leave, right? Can they just walk out with anything? Or is there some type of security which checks, hey, you're carrying that PC, do you have authorization to take that out of here, right? Is there a hard drive with all your customers' data on it about to walk out the door? How about the cameras that you have? Are those easy to hack? Remember, those are entry points, and there are many cases where cameras are hacked and people gain access to the network that way. And too often the cameras are managed by facilities management as well. So please make sure that you coordinate at the very least and have a chance to look at what solutions the head of facilities is planning. Monitoring. This just does not get done enough and often enough. Are you able to detect anomalies on your network? That's key to identifying and addressing breaches. Do you even know if you've been compromised? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. If you're not monitoring regularly, I suspect you are not. Would you be able to detect, for example, some strange outbound traffic to countries that you don't even do business with? Perhaps there are some rules on your firewall you can put down as a result of this monitoring. So you do your monitoring to identify your typical business practices, and then you can identify anomalies, all right? How about user behavior? Can you identify, for example, if someone who has been working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, all of a sudden on a Saturday goes into the office, they log in, that in itself isn't highly unusual, but if they start downloading hundreds of thousands of records on a Saturday, that should be a red flag, and you should have some way to identify that. How about if 50 users all had their accounts locked after an unsuccessful login? I'm sure your help desk gets lots of tickets. I think the majority of them are people having trouble logging in. But do you ever do that second level of review to see if there's a bunch of people having the same problem at the same time, which could indicate an attack? How about managed service providers? These can be really good for many companies. However, sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. I've had discussions with my peers over the years, and I recall conversations where some say, man, this MSSP saved us. They identified this hack and we shut down the entry point, and it was great. And I've had other conversations with other peers who have said, we found issues before they even notified us, so why are we paying all this money? Because they're not cheap. However, they can alleviate a lot of the burden on your team. So see if that's right for you. It may or may not, but it definitely, monitoring should be on your radar, okay? Now, reporting that can come from a variety of sources is really important, okay? When you get your reports, first of all, from your standard systems, such as your network vulnerability scans, you must develop and implement a remediation plan. You can't just take the report and say, hey, look, let's check a box, we did it. You've got to seal up those leaks that you have, and you would inevitably have them because they're not of your doing. They're the vendors that develop applications that are written by human beings, which means that other human beings can find ways in. So this is a constant cat and mouse game. So you need to continuously scan and remediate vulnerabilities. How about comparing reports from the variety of tools that you have? We all have patch management solutions, or we should. We all scan for vulnerabilities, and we all have the anti-malware or endpoint protection solutions. Well, have you ever thought of comparing the report for all three? You will guaranteed find that there are systems whose agents have not been all properly installed and all don't have patches. I can speak from experience about this, where we, for example, did a discovery scan using a network vulnerability tool, found all the systems touching our network. We then looked in our endpoint protection management console and said, my goodness, why are these handful of systems not in that management console? That means that their agent wasn't properly installed, so we have systems that are not properly protected. Ran the exception report, generated a ticket, and got those updated and patched immediately, because there's your backdoor into your network. So don't just assume that you've got solutions in place and they're all installed. Trust but verify, okay? Very important. So take a look at these and you can compare a variety of reports that you have based on what tools you have to see if things are being deployed correctly. And this can happen with your patch management agents as well, where they're not properly installed. This could be a network issue. Somebody could have turned their system off. So please follow up with this and follow up on all remediation efforts. Once you remediate, you still have an obligation to rescan and review the reports again, because you want to make sure that what you deployed or what the system admins deployed actually worked. Now, let's talk about access management. This is crucial because you've got to make sure you have a good provisioning and deprovisioning process and procedures. And the only people that can help ensure that this happens is HR. Once again, we have to team up with HR. So if somebody leaves your company, are you 100% certain that you've severed all their access? If you think about what happens in a lot of companies, you've got somebody who's been there 10 years, and over those 10 years, they have filled out forms, and you've even signed them as their supervisor, saying, yes, give them access to this, they need it, give them access to that. And after a while, that list highly develops into they have access to 20, 30 apps, 40 apps. Do they need access to all of those? And when they leave, is there one central place where you can just turn off all their access? If you have an identity access management solution that you paid 6 figures for, yes, if it's deployed correctly, but a large number of companies do not have the money nor the time to configure that the right way. So one, you've got to make sure that there's a process to approve and grant access to systems. And then you also have to make sure that you have procedures for deprovisioning, okay? You might have to periodically audit systems if you don't have a high-powered technological solution. One of the things that I had to do, because I did not have that solution, was create a manual process where we regularly asked system owners to generate the list of everyone with access to their systems and the level of access that they had. Were they just a user? Were they a group manager? Did they have escalated privileges? Then I would compare that list and make sure that the people in the different divisions approved who had that access. So a periodic audit helped identify people who have either changed roles and no longer needed access, people whose roles have changed where they were no longer in need of the excess level of access, and we would remove those people from access to the system to help keep that list from growing out of control, and for when people left, forgetting about and leaving access in. So someone's from home didn't have a backdoor into a system that they never should have any longer. Multi-factor authentication has been in a lot of discussions over the past couple of years, and I think it's something that you should be looking at if you haven't already. It's got to be in place for every admin access that you have throughout your network, and particularly for access to any mission-critical system, because password hacking is just too prevalent, it's too easy today, so you need that second factor. As a matter of fact, you might even consider multi-factor authentication for everything. All right, that should be your goal. It could take a little time to get there, but at least your critical systems and all admins must have MFA. And don't forget to have a little chat with your admins. I see this quite often, where they just like to log in with their admin privileges account. All admins should have basically 2 accounts. One is with escalated privileges, so they can do what they need on the network. but the other should be just a regular access level, that same as we all have, because that's where they do the majority of their work. And then when they need the escalated privileges, they can log in. This is going to have to be a little meeting of the minds with the CTO to make sure their team is doing this, because anyone who's logged in all day long with admin privilege, that is just a big potential target. If your network ever gets breached, if these people are logged in, they've got the keys to the city. So please be careful with this concept and make sure you have those meetings with the head of system admins. Did I mention patch? You know I did. But how about we think of patching as super important? If Equifax had just followed the basic patching, nothing fancy, they would not have had that huge breach that compromised millions of records. Keeping up to date with patching, in my opinion, can mitigate 75% of all risks that we encounter with security. We remember WannaCry and the ransomware attack. That would not have happened if the systems were patched. And we're not talking about a patch that just came out a week ago. These were patches that have been out for months and months. So I can't stress enough patching. As a matter of fact, that's number one on my list, and it should be number one on your list of security controls moving forward. Incident response is becoming more and more important because we're finding out that most systems are now getting penetrated due to the wide variety of ways and new technologies that are introduced prematurely. So we must be able to minimize the damage. So step one, create and test an incident response plan. I see the creation of the response plans being made in a lot of organizations, but when I ask them, are you testing your plan? They go, oh no, that's on our agenda. We need to do that. You definitely need to do that, and that's what's often missing. Make that a high priority. So identify the threats to your organization, your geographic location, and also based on your culture, because they will be different from company to company, from industry to industry. You must build a really good team, an incident response team. And it's not just security, it's not just system admins. You need legal, public relations, and finance, because part of the incident response team is responding if you have a breach, and you should never be the one speaking to the press or to anyone. So that's got to be PR and legal teaming up, and finance, of course, needs to know what's going on, because this could lead towards huge stockholder issues if you're a publicly traded company, or if you're a company that has to be in compliance. Keep important stakeholders informed early and regularly anytime there's an incident that might deem the involvement of upper management. Don't take this all upon yourself. Did you know that if you have an incident response team, it will reduce the cost on average of a breach of $360,000, and that's based on a Ponyman report from 2019. Encryption. Many of us feel that we encrypt and we're in good shape, but are you encrypting everything and everywhere, both at rest and in transit? Most of us encrypt in transit. We take that for granted, but there's a few caveats about that. But are you also encrypting at rest? Because even if you're breached, if data is encrypted, you have another layer of security right there waiting. And please, if you do development, or if you have system admins who fancy themselves very clever, please don't let anyone in your organization create your own encryption algorithms. There are accepted algorithms out there that have been tested and that have been developed over many, many years. And those are the ones that you want to be using. An example is AES in the United States. The US government has made that the encryption standard. Don't forget about key management. I've actually seen systems at companies where both their keys and their data are on the same server. Or what's wrong with this picture? So make sure you have a good key management process. There's lots of data on the internet to find out about that, or you can ask your peers at at a variety of events or networking groups, what they do for key management. You should consider rotating your keys and keep them in a separate place that is secure. And please, getting back to encryption in transit, don't use insecure protocols like SSL. You might not be aware that you should be using a minimum TLS 1.2. 1.3 is out and is more secure, but companies are still in the process of migrating. Telnet passes data unencrypted, a great way for a hack to occur. Extensive use of encryption, by the way, also another result from the Poynter report, can reduce the average cost of a data breach by $360,000. So there's good reasons besides the obvious to go with this. Let's talk about disaster recovery. All right, make sure that you're collaborating with the key business stakeholders for all your systems as you're trying to build your discovery and your recovery plan. So make sure that you identify acceptable downtime, and that will vary from application to application. That's known as the RTO, or the recovery time objective. Make sure you identify the acceptable loss of data, or the recovery point objective for each system. But first of all, meet with executive teams and business owners and identify all the mission critical systems. You then must align your strategies with your business continuity plan. And sometimes that will involve manual processes. If you're attacked and your electronic systems are down, business must go on. You might have a help desk staff and people in the field start reverting to manual gathering of data. And so you must have a good plan to address that. It's tied in with your DR plan that you will have to create as a result of all this investigation. But don't forget to test the plan, just like with our incident response plan. You must test your disaster recovery plan to make sure it works, whatever you come up with as a solution. And you might even consider backing up to the cloud. I'm seeing more and more of that. Sometimes companies will split their data, and perhaps if they're a medical company or a company that works with PII, they're backing that up locally, but all their other data is backed up to the cloud. So that's something for you to look at. But whatever you do, the other thing I would highly recommend is for you to network and collaborate. You know, attend events like this, attend networking events, make new contacts, share the war stories that you've encountered, just as I have, and the solutions. You can help prevent a breach with your friends in the company. In the United States, we've got the FBI CyberWatch and InfraGard. These are organizations that work with government to help prevent breaches and to respond. As I mentioned earlier, I run the local chapters of ISA and OWASP. These are not-for-profit organizations of security professionals. I highly recommend you look into these and others wherever you are. And if there's nothing locally where you are, you could form your own group. Look for meetups. There are lots of meetups out there today. Keep learning. And this goes for everything about your existence on this planet, not just InfoSec, but we should always keep learning and prepare ourselves for whatever life will bring us. There are many different alerts you can subscribe to find out about the latest trends, attacks, and techniques. There are webcasts on a regular basis. There are security leaders who have some great blogs where they're sharing information, as well as podcasts, classes and books. And what I do each morning, I look in my LinkedIn and my Twitter feeds and see who's sharing something that's new and useful. Some people go to CNN to start their day. I go to LinkedIn and Twitter because people are sharing links on a regular basis. And not only can I see what's in the standard news, but I see what InfoSec experts are sharing, and there's a difference. I'll get more valuable information there. But please also help prepare the next generation of security leaders, because we know that there is not enough people out there to address the issues that I've been talking about today. Hacking's growing. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and we need more people. And we certainly need more diversity. We need more minorities. We need more women. We need people to join us and feel warm and welcome. Make sure that you are sensitive to the variety of needs, a variety of different types of people, and not just assume that everybody wants to, quote, go to war with us and fight. Those terms and that language may or may not appeal to certain people. Broaden your net, be more inclusive. How about the next generation, right? Hire students and train mentors, speak at schools. And I also talked about how application security professionals or developers are not getting enough security in their curriculums. Well, perhaps you can help schools build their curriculum, or even do some part-time teaching. I know several InfoSec peers are doing this, and they're helping tremendously. And cyber competitions also are very helpful. I want to talk about something to me that's really crucial in the life of an InfoSec leader, and that is be prepared to address your executive management in their terms. You know, I mentioned businessese earlier, right? But have you provided them the information they need to oversee cyber risks, right? Have you matched the cybersecurity strategy to your company's business risks, right? Keep all your dialogue within the business framework. So just talk to them about risk and money. They will not respond if you come in with fancy charts about the number of attacks, or your remediation plans. What they want to know is the company at risk today, and what will it cost to fix it, and what's the potential loss, so they can evaluate. Sometimes a company will accept the risk. Other times, they want to transfer the risk. So you had the discussion with them about cyber insurance. It's getting to the point where almost every company has to look for an insurance policy. You saw how much it costs to address breaches. That could really damage a company, particularly a small to medium-sized company. But a word of caution about insurance. You might have to get a secondary policy because some insurance companies cap the potential loss payments, and you might have more data than they would cover in a single policy. Also, make sure when they give you that assessment initially to accept the insurance, you will have to certify that you have certain controls in place. And if somebody just signs off on it without running it by you, or if you want to make it look good and you sign it but you're not really doing it, you will severely jeopardize the payout from insurance. I've known many companies where the insurance says, we're not paying you because you do not have these policies and procedures in place, even though you signed off that you did. So be careful so that you will not lose your policies. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me today. I hope that I have given you a lot to think about and shared my experiences with you. You can reach me at richard@securityadvisorsllc.com, or my Twitter account is R.A. Greenberg, and of course I'm on LinkedIn. So please feel free to reach out, but do take a look again at these slides if you want, and consider addressing some of the needs in your company. It's been a pleasure, and please stay safe out there. Thank you.